Wait.
Yeah.
And then we have to yell at you down there. You need to sit over here because we got to be able to see that. So okay, are we finally ready?
You're more welcome.
Okay. I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting of Thursday, March 17th, 2011 to order. Our next business is the approval of the February 15th committee minutes. Move for approval.
Second.
Any comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we are now ready to talk about the debt policy, the model debt policy update.
We've got Lauren from PFM hopefully with us. Hi, Lauren.
Hey, Eric.
And wanted to have Lauren join us remotely here as we did a few months ago, kind of go through the debt policy update, some of which is driven by the comptroller guidelines that have been put out so that we're in compliance with those. I would mention a lot of what this city did has served as a guideline for the comptroller's models and ideas that he's put out there statewide. So this helps us finish that and take that the rest of the way in terms of being in compliance. And Russ, other points you think we need to touch on, and we'll let Lauren take us through the presentation.
I think let Lauren take you through the presentation, and what we'll look for and what she'll point out are some pieces of required language that we need to add to our debt policy. Some of ours alludes to it already, but it's not as clear and specific as the comptroller wants, so we just need to make some additions. I'll turn it over to Lauren.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Eric. Can everyone hear me and see me clearly?
Yes.
What about, can you see, and we'll be good. Everything looks good here?
Okay, everything's good there.
Go ahead, please.
Under full disclosure, I can see Eric very well and Alderman Peterson, so I will look to the two of you to give me a hands up if I need to stop for anything. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I do want to cover just a few things pretty quickly with this presentation and the information that was provided in your agenda packet. One of which is, as Russ and Eric mentioned, kind of looking at the adopted guidelines that were adopted by the State Funding Board in December of 2010. They do kind of cover some things that they specifically want to address, and then they elaborate with minimum language or language that you have to include within your policy, or if you don't have a policy, it gives you a starting point or a guideline. Russ did mention the city's policy really did cover in some way, form, or fashion these topics already, but to be in compliance with the comptroller's guidelines, we do want to just go ahead and include the suggested language so there's no question, and so we are in compliance for future transactions because this relates to any entity that will be issuing debt. I want to talk about how I actually see those guidelines and the specific language fitting into the city's policy, keeping in mind that the policy does not have to go in front of the comptroller or be adopted by a governing body with this language until January 1st, 2012. So it gives us some time to look at it, but we certainly want to be kind of the front runner on adopting this language and moving forward. I also want to quickly cover where we left things on the city's capacity model and give you an update as to our future plans for the next 2 to 3 months. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and step into the presentation looking at what the funding board adopted. On page 3, as I mentioned, the state funding board adopted in December what we've all kind of come to call the debt policy guidelines for, that just seems to be the thing that really fits here. It's meant for not only issuers like the city who have an existing policy to kind of step back, look at their policy, make sure they're in compliance, but also those who don't have any existing policy. They really want entities to focus on understanding transactions, debt transactions, explaining the information as related to the debt to their citizens, their governing body, to make sure everyone understands and recognize and avoid conflicts of interest if they do exist. And at the end of the day, disclose all the costs and risk associated with the debt that they intend to issue. And they have suggested mandatory language for us to adopt or include within our policy as long as we do it by January 1st, 2012. see. I will tell you, all of this really boils down to, in my opinion, is disclosure. It's how you plan to issue debt, what type of instruments you want to use, kind of just putting it into an outline format so that when you go to look at doing debt, you've already put some guidelines in place. The city's policy does a lot of this. They also want you to disclose how you'll select professionals, what their costs are associated with their work that they'll do, any conflicts of interest that could exist, and how you plan to handle those, ongoing costs related to the debt or the professionals, and compliance issues, and how you plan to review your policy either on an annualized basis or kind of what determines when you'll review your policy. I'm not going to read you the mandatory language that I have on page 5, but they want to cover transparency and disclosure of cost, and as it relates to the cost of the debt as well as the professionals involved. The professional section seems to be a little bit more elaborated on. It's the focus on that you should have an engagement letter with a counsel representing the city, so a bond counsel. A financial advisor should have some form of a written agreement or engagement letter. And then it goes further to explain that when as financial advisors can competitively bid on an entity's debt, when they can perform as the underwriter. Specifically with this piece, it doesn't quite fit given your current situation because PSM does not underwrite bonds. However, we did include it in your policy to be within compliance with the comptroller's guidelines. And in the event, in 5 to 10 years, if the situation were to change with the city, that you've already outlined this particular situation if it does arise.
Okay, what about the bonds? What did you say about the bonds? It doesn't say that.
PSM, your FA, we do not underwrite bonds. So the piece where it says under financial advisor, competitive bid, FA can bid on an issue. We don't bid on transactions. We don't buy debt. We only serve as an independent financial advisor. So it doesn't actually apply to the city right now, nor does the negotiated sale because we will never serve as an underwriter. But we included this within the city's policy to be in compliance with the comptroller.
Thank you.
I see people moving. Are we still
we just
went blank.
We timed out for a minute.
there for a minute.
Oh, no. Okay, good. And then specifically on underwriters, they do want you to include that if an entity was to issue debt with an underwriter on board but did not have a financial advisor, that the underwriter does disclose the cost associated with the debt as well as their compensation for serving as the underwriter. Right now, none of these apply to the city because you do have an existing FA that doesn't underwrite, but we did want to include all this information within your policy.
and I believe that I was going to say I believe prior to your serving, we did have that situation. So we've kind of taken ourselves out of the possible conflict by engaging your firm.
You're absolutely right. So what we wanted to do is just include it to be in compliance, and if a situation ever arises, we have it spelled out per the comptroller's recommendation. Conflicts also very much stems off of the professionals. Any conflicts that are existing or could come about, that they're properly disclosed and handled. Your policy already addressed conflicts of interest, but we did just expand on it and include the required language. So I want to talk to you a little bit on page 6 where I've gone ahead, and I believe that you have my redlined copy of the debt policy and where I've put this required language already in your existing policy. Just to let you know, I did notice I've included page numbers under these sections, like there's transparency, then professionals, and I break them down. Because it's redlined, the page numbers might be off one. However, the sections are still the same. So what I thought may work, and please forgive me if I look down because I'm actually flipping through the red line version. Under transparency of all costs related to the issuance cost as well as your professionals, I have it under, you have a section already called disclosure by your financing team members. So I have covered actually these first two sections with transparency and then professionals, because right under professionals it says you must include professionals engaged in the debt issuance process are required to clearly disclose all compensation. So under this section, which actually on a red line version falls on page 14, I have included the required language related to disclosure of transactional fees and how they will be disclosed to the finance director, which would be Russ, and then that Russ shall disclose this information to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in a timely manner. Under professionals, you did have a section already denoted for bond counsel, which is on in a red line version. It's on page 13. However, the piece that I actually inserted was on page 14 on a red line version, and it just specifically states that you will enter into an engagement letter agreement with a particular lawyer or a law firm related to the issuance of debt. On the financial advisors, you did already have a section denoted for how you will select a financial advisor, and all this falls under consultants within your policy. So the section under financial advisor, I went ahead and right off the bat it says the city shall select, this is on page 11 of a red line version, the city shall select a financial advisor or advisors to assist in its debt issuance and debt administration process. And I said that you would enter into an agreement with each person and or firm serving as your FA, and then broke down the requirement per the state guidelines about the competitive sale and the negotiated sale and when an FA could bid. Recognize it doesn't quite fit right now, but we do want to fully disclose this information per their guidelines. For underwriters, you did already include a section related to how you would select an underwriter. And that was on page 10 of a red line version, and it just went ahead and included that, it says the Board of Mayor and Aldermen or its designee shall select the senior manager for a proposed negotiated sale. That is an underwriter. And then I included that if there is no financial advisor, the underwriter in a publicly offered negotiated sale should be required to disclose their compensation as well as the interest costs associated with the debt. Your conflicts of interest section was already included in your existing policy. That is towards the end of this, on the bottom of page 13. And your statement before just said the city requires that its consultants and advisors provide objective advice and analysis and pretty much remain free of conflicts of interest. However, though, I did put in the required language pretty much if a conflict was to arise that it has to be disclosed. So those are pretty much the changes that I would suggest, and pretty much we don't have a lot of control, but in terms of suggestions of where we move this language, I'm open to those, but this does take care of the comptroller's guidelines, and at that point we would be in compliance with their stated guidelines that we need to adopt by January 2012. Any questions related to that?
I think pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Good.
And then what I wanted to spend just a few minutes on is to give everyone a quick update. Since we were talking about the debt policy, and part of the debt policy is looking at the capacity of the city and the benchmarking and the affordability of the debt, existing debt and future debt. I wanted to, and I know that you've all had this information, so certainly, and I've already walked through it, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but just to recap, we did this in July of 2010, which was post-issuance of all new money that the city has done recently. So we did a couple of transactions in 2010 for new money or for new projects. Then we gave you this update in July. We, after that, did do a refunding, but that was for no new debt. That was actually to refinance existing debt. So these benchmarks that we have put in place, they're from July, so this is just a recap of those, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those because they are going to change. And that's where my next kind of point is if you look, I just wanted to recap, and pretty much in the summary matrix on page 14, that we were in compliance with all but one of our benchmarks that we set forth in the policy. And that what we intend to do in our next steps for the city would be to work with Russ and his team to put in the actual, now that we've got the audit behind us, put the actual numbers in for 2010, work with the city to put in more realistic numbers as we're nearing the end of 2011, and as we get ready for budget season. Also, we'll rely on Moody's to update their median data, which we've used consistently going through this process when we benchmark ourselves against AAA, AA, so forth like that. They typically update it in April. They're usually pretty good about it, but I don't know exactly when it'll be in April. They won't disclose that. We'll also look at updating projections for the revenues for 2012 and going forward. And also look at the updated census information because I know that is the hot topic. It's all been released now. We'll work on that information. And then hopefully if all goes well, we'll be looking to provide an update to you all late May, at the very latest early June on where the capacity model shakes out in terms of the benchmarking that we do for the city.
Well, that is one of the things that I wanted to ask about, because on page 10 is, as you stated, the one where we are not in good position on our benchmarks. And so on page 10, we really are outside the benchmark that we have adopted as policy. I do see your point is that Moody's will update their part of it, which I guess is one of the lines on AAA, AA, and A. But we're exceeding our policy right now, and exceeding is not good on this one. On the other one that I consider to be very important, and that is the general fund balance. Of course, we're in good shape on that. But as I say, the debt service as a percent of operating expenses, we are not following the benchmark that we have set.
We are, but of course, this is one to always remember. We have, by being financially prudent in reducing our budget to live within our means, we make this ratio look worse. So the fact that we've reduced our budget 15% in some ways works against us in how this ratio works. So I don't think any of us would advocate that we raise our budget so that we look better on this ratio, but it's one of the measures, and you take it as a whole along with the other five. It is still something to look at, but you look at it in the context of all of these, which I think is what the rating agencies look at, and I think we should look at as leaders of the organization at how we look on all of these as a whole. But it is one, and it's an important one. But just a reminder that we, in some ways, worked against this one by making the reductions in spendings that we needed to make to make our budget balance.
Yeah.
So,
But again, it is also because we have taken on considerably more debt in probably the last 6 or 8 years than the city has ever had before. So I do appreciate the comment about having reduced our operating expenditures. I think that was a key to us for the last, couple of years. It has made a tremendous difference in our financial situation. But again, to me, I know there's several benchmarks here, but the two key ones to me are the one on that we have on fund balance as a percent of operating revenues, and the debt services as a percent of operating expenditures, because those really tell us a lot to me. I mean, the others are not bad. I mean, net debt per capita or things like that. And by the way, that will certainly change with our new census figures.
The population is over 10% higher than what we based this on, so that
right, and that's
will
the
look
other
better
thing. In
too.
the last 8 years, we've increased, but we just did a report today. 10 years ago, we were 40,000 some, and now we're 60 some. What is it? 62,000. And so those things are going to increase as it grows, and we have demands for.
But now let us say our debt has changed much more than 50% in the last 10 years. Go ahead. Yeah, much more.
But we have to take all that into consideration as well.
Question.
Your point was
Lauren said that she would have her update by May or June. Will we have finalized budget by then?
Are you saying late May? You're saying late May, so we really will not have finalized budget, right?
Yeah,
That's correct.
You'll get your budget around the first week of May from us in terms of the administrative recommendation. Then you'll work through that through the balance of May and into June, typically taking your final votes in June to adopt it for July 1 fiscal year. So you'll get this kind of in midstream of the budget process when it's in your hands, essentially.
We have to look into that.
What about some other comments?
I'd like to make one comment if I could.
Thank you,
if I'm
please.
on. Now I'm on. I'd just like to make the point that we do have one of our benchmarks that is not within our limits, but the other 4 are okay, and that we do have a plan to bring us back to within the normal range, and also the comment that if we'd just increase our budget, we could get that one back to normal. So, do we want to raise the budget to $70 million? No. So that's my only comment.
The only other side to that is that we do anticipate borrowing more money. We have not borrowed enough money to fund our the top 3 priorities yet. I think that's right.
You have the balance of Hillsborough to borrow,
Right.
but that was factored into your funding plan when we did this originally. So.
I guess the one thing that I would want you to add is because of circumstances, low interest rates, the federal stimulus and the recovery zone bond capability, we borrowed some of this money earlier than we originally planned to borrow. Mm-hmm. And that has affected, they've shifted these numbers forward just a little bit. Not a lot, but that's also a factor in why this has jumped up.
Good point. And we did that on purpose because of the circumstances.
The window of opportunity to get the low interest rates.
How does this, with you mentioned Hillsborough, how does that environmental request, I don't know what else to call it, it's going to put us back for a year. How is that going to play out with how we've been funding this, what we funded so far and what we plan to fund in 2011-12 and 2012-13?
Yeah, and I'd be careful about saying it puts us back a year. It could. We're still working through the timing of that.
That's their estimate.
Yeah, that's
not ours.
We're working through that. We're trying to still push that along and hopefully have that move sooner than later. That's all been part of what's incorporated in that budget overall.
Yeah,
and it's some of the strings that come with taking $1.75 million worth of state funding that's really federal funding that passes through the state. So you've got to kind of respond to those guidelines as they come through, and that's the price of getting that help. And sometimes that's one of the things we need to continue to do and do maybe a little more of is do a cost benefit of is that grant really worth it for what we get out of timing and the local dollar is more flexible and we can respond more quickly using it. But we do like to spend the non-local dollar first if we can. So that's the balance that we're trying to strike.
But because of all the red tape, I have a tendency to run away from that stuff and not want to go there. But some people say, well, it's our federal dollars, it's our tax dollars we've sent to the federal government coming back. But you can play with that. But still, at the same time, I think there are times that we have to make some choices that say, well, it's not worth it, time or money. This time is money here. So, but I just wanted to know how that played into our budget that's coming up here.
I think it's all able to be accommodated in the budget of that project at this point. We're continuing to push through that timing issue and hopefully can get some.
So that won't change this that much?
No, should not.
That was something that we will be obviously talking about too. Does anyone else have a comment or a question? This was very good, and again, I think a very effective way to handle this. If that's worked on your end, it certainly has worked well for us, I believe.
I would agree. I have to thank your IT department, though. They did walk me through it a few times today to make sure we had no hiccups when we got into the actual finance committee.
Very good, very good. If there's nothing else then, or is there? Okay.
I think we're finished with Lauren, right?
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Good talking to you all.
Thank you.
Now, I guess we need to make the recommendation to put in the requested
Policy updates.
So moved.
changes?
Yes.
Second.
Any other comment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do you want us to just move this right to the full board as a consent item, or do you want to have any more discussion on
I would
work
think,
session?
I mean, obviously, since it's the comptroller's guidelines and we've got to apply, but it looks as if everything
The
went pretty
substance isn't
smoothly.
really much different than what you've had
Because
all
we
along.
already
It's-
had this.
Yeah, it's some more specifics or specific language that makes it a little cleaner in terms of compliance, so.
Because we're really not going to have to change anything in our policy, are we? It's
The
just
only thing that's in here that
specifying
we
some
haven't
order.
really done in the past is that engagement letter with the council. And we even did that last year, knowing that this was coming. It wasn't in our
Yeah.
policy, but we went ahead and started doing that. So that's really the only change in our behavior that is affected by this language.
I think you can move it to consent, but I wanted to check
No,
with you because it's the board's
yeah.
policy, and
Right.
you know, you all put a lot of time into getting here. So originally, so
But I think this handles or resolves anything that there might have been. I mean, I think we've been very cautious in putting all those extras in. So let's see. I think we already have the motion.
Did the state thank us for providing a model for them to adopt this?
we were going to send them a bill for the labor.
I'm sorry, do we vote?
Yes,
We
yes,
did.
you're good.
Okay.
Okay. Item number 4 is a consideration of a bid award to Nova Copy, Inc. of Nashville.
Excuse me. These are, Brian's not here tonight, but these are the copiers that are in the budget. This is just for you to review the bid tallies and the suggested awards.
I thought, it said not specifically budgeted, it meant not line item?
Not line item.
Okay, but handle, I mean, what did we say?
within the-
But covered, but covered.
Is it standard policy that you don't deal with trade-ins separately? That's part of the deal, usually?
Brian doesn't like to hear about trade-ins. He likes to sell what we have to dispose of on the open market, but in some cases, it works to our benefit, but it's really done on a case-by-case basis.
But I noticed all the others also required the trade-in of equipment in the bids, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments or requests for more information? Well, is there a motion to recommend this?
Recommend it to the board as is.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay. And then we're, number 5 is the consideration of sole source purchase from Massimo Corporation of Irvine, California for carbon monoxide monitors. This one's short enough that I could name all the things I need.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. One of the things we did, we wrote a grant for assistance to firefighters, and we got notification we received that grant. So this is a request on our part for your acceptance and to move this forward to full board on March 22nd. As you can see, the total cost is $34,842. With the firefighter grant paying a 80% portion of that of $27,873.60, and the city's obligation would be $6,968.40.
In our current budget.
Correct.
And
We're going to
it's
absorb
certainly a
this
good
in our
deal.
current
It's
budget.
certainly a good
4 to
deal for
1
us.
grant.
That's right.
Oh,
Right.
11 here, so I'm thinking it.
And
That's
not
the
only-
current year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not only will this be used for our firefighters, but carbon monoxide is the largest killers of elderly, and we will use that on our visitors as well as our citizens as we respond out in the community.
So this is at least one per station, is what this would amount to?
Yes. It will give us a total of 7. We have 1 current.
You have, where's that right now?
We keep it on the battalion chief's vehicle.
Okay, good. Who knows? Might have to use on me someday. One per truck. That's good.
Is there a recommendation from the community?
I recommend, staff's recommendation.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Item number 6 is a consideration of recommendation for the award of the fiscal year 2011 audit contract, and you've just gotten new information about this. So
Last
tonight,
Finance Committee, we talked about bringing your way the proposal for the audit for 2011, and for 2010's audit, we paid $50,750. And when we put out the proposal, we got 3 quality responses. Any of the 3 could have done the job. And I know in the language we talk about not necessarily bringing you a recommendation, but I guess what we might do is we might actually make a proposal that in looking at the 3 firms that have made proposals, when we looked at their cost, if we were to accept Crossland and Associates, the audit for 2011 would be $47,500. So actually it would be even more cost effective than it was even for the 2011 audit. And if Crossland sounds familiar, I actually attached on the back of what I handed out where they actually do the audit for Nashville.
No, they just handed this out.
yeah, they just, right there. Sorry. Yes.
And there was an evaluation committee, and the entire committee basically had the same proposal to go with Crossland. But again, it was all 3 firms were excellent. Any of them would have been great choices, but we knew that this would be the one that would be the least costly for the city and still be able to get the quality product that we needed.
And your comment about any one of these 3 would have certainly been an excellent choice.
Exactly.
And this one has the benefit of being cheaper.
Exactly.
Or wait, I should say, we say less expensive, I guess, if we're talking about professional services there.
And if it's okay, I may go ahead and mention about the conference center. We also
Okay.
asked the same 3 firms to quote a price on the conference center. And it turned out that Crossland also was the lowest proposal, even on the conference center.
this is that.
And in 2011, we paid approximately $13,000. So it actually is even more, it's more cost effective than what we paid in 2011 also. So probably as staff, we're probably making a proposal rather than a recommendation because, of course, the audit basically is looking at the staff, trying to figure out how successful we've handled the financials.
Because they're auditing the city, but they're also auditing our department. That's right. Well, this is good news, too, because I believe the comment was made that the conference center is relatively small in comparison to the other prices, and so ideally you could piggyback on this. And it sounds as if that would work, that's workable also.
So do we need to deal with these as 2 separate items, or?
I think you just award each of those individually.
Let's bring back a
We'll bring
contract.
those to you
Oh,
as
okay.
a contract.
We're going to send it forward or not?
Yeah.
We're not taking any
I
action.
think that last year as the audit committee, you selected which one that you wanted to go with, or 4 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever we did that. And then we brought the contract back to the full board. But we can do it either way.
We'll develop the contract and bring it to the board if you're comfortable with this.
So I guess,
Process and
so
award.
our,
This needs to come back here again.
So I move that the first item, full audit of the city, that we accept Crossland and prepare a contract to present to the full board.
Second.
any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those no. Okay, and so now what do we do about the...
Then do the conference center.
Conference
Second
center.
one, that we also, through staff's recommendation, that we select Crossland for the audit of the conference center
Second.
and prepare a contract and presentation to the full board.
Yep, second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Very good. That goes with this. Okay, item number 7 is consideration of a contract award to Cheryl Morgan of Covington, Kentucky, in the for the 12-month term of service as a consultant. I'm just kind of bringing this in. And we did have someone who also wanted to speak to the committee. What would be better, the staff make the presentation or hear the...
We'd be glad to take you through that.
I think we should do some staff first.
Yeah. Okay, let's go.
Okay, we'll have some of our HR staff up here as well. Go ahead. All right, wanted to follow up with this. This had been, as you know, an item that had some discussion at the March 8th meeting. Wanted to bring this back to you. And I guess our focus as staff on this is to talk a little more about process and specifically the scope of service that we requested and how that was responded to by the different vendors that proposed on it. And as we do these processes, we just talked about one. We put out a description of what we want, what the scope of services are, provide an opportunity for the potential vendors to ask questions, respond to those questions. Addendums are developed sometimes to reflect that, and that happened in this case. And basically, we put out a scope of service that said what we wanted and how that would work. One of the things I'd draw your attention to that I think is probably the most important thing to spend some time looking at is this matrix that we put together that summarizes the elements of the scope of service and how the 8 different vendors responded to those elements of the scope of service. That, I think, it gives you a good background in terms of how they measured up to those, and I think helps explain where we ended up in terms of the relative rating of those proposers. We then also did apply a scale in terms of the costs that were provided by the different vendors to assign points relative to the cost that was offered for each of those services. So I guess what I'd like to have us do is take you through a brief description of the elements of the scope of service so you understand why those were important to us and what those were, what we asked for when we went out for a proposal.
Got a question before we start. And in this, can we address why, if we put out an RFP, why we got bids back that were all over the board? Because to me, that I used to respond all the time to RFPs or RFQs, and usually when we would win contracts, we would be right there with somebody else right on the level, and we would get all the bids back, so we saw what the other firms were bidding. And we were always close, within a couple $1,000 or $5,000. I think we had one that was 200 and some thousand, and we had one that was 24, 20, 30.
9,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to me, this is like way up here and way down here, and I don't understand why we would get such erratic bids back in.
Well, let me talk about that. I think we define that scope fairly clearly, but a request for proposal is also intended to have some openness to it so that folks can propose different approaches that they think best match what your needs are. So you're going to have some play on certain ones, and especially, I think, services of this nature. We're not buying a commodity. We're buying a service that can be delivered a number of different ways, so you're going to have a variety of those, of how people may have approached it. But I will say you have about 6 proposals that are in a fairly close group, between $25,000 and $40,000. So while there may be some outliers on both ends, 2/3 of your proposals came in within a fairly close band, I would say, in terms of cost, somewhere between $25,000 and around $40,000. So I think that tells you our history in the past has been around $35,000 has been spent originally when we used a consultant when we first moved in the direction we're operating today. A few of the updates have been a little less, but we are asking a little more here, and I think some of this is reflective of the uncertainty that we face in the health insurance and the healthcare world these days too. I think that is something, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to go out and have a process that helped us identify a wide range of options for us, because we want to make sure we're getting good assistance that helps us strategically work through this while we manage our costs, but also make sure we're providing the best possible benefits we can for our employees.
I understand that, but while we're addressing this, I still want to know why we'd have, okay, some of them in the category of 30, 24, 42, 47,000, and then we would have another category, basically forget the 9,400, but the other category of 249 and 120 and 99. So what are they bidding on that these other people are not bidding on, Shirley?
I almost think you can best address that by one of the vendors that, or one of the people that proposed, did 3 options.
Yeah, I saw
and they
that.
range from 25,000 to 120. It's really in the scope of services, and we did leave that somewhat open. We told them what we were really looking for, but we also invited them to tell us to add more to it that might be helpful.
Right. So when you chose them, I'm just trying to understand this. When you chose them, then did you look at these costs of 249, 47, and everything, and just throw them out because that was 249? Or did you break that 249 down and say, okay, part of that 249 was 30,000 or whatever it was because they had them?
We had to base it on the total proposal. You have to look at the bottom line of what they gave you. You can't say, I want to pay you $15,000 for this and that's
No,
it.
but
That's
they
not
broke-
how it works.
I
You
know.
take the proposal they give you.
Yeah, I know.
And you evaluate
They
it.
broke it down. So
yeah,
I'm
that,
asking what you
we
based
looked at
it
their
on.
performance related to the scope, outside of the cost. We said, how well did they answer the question and the elements of scope that we asked them to perform for us? How well did they do with that? Didn't really look at cost at that element. And then assigned a sliding scale of points based on what their cost came in at, to try to reflect that variety but give appropriate credit for the value offered by that vendor. So ultimately, in the day, you're looking for lowest and best. You're looking at who best met the scope at the best match in
Okay.
terms of price.
Okay, so then when I would look at this, again, I'm just trying to understand this. So then again, if I were looking at this and I saw 249, I would just automatically throw it out. I wouldn't look at how they broke
We didn't
it down.
automatically throw anybody out, but you
No.
can see that's the lowest rated one.
But-
They didn't do particularly well in meeting the scope
Yeah.
or in the price.
Yeah, and then, but then you had one at 64, you know, at 47, and so, well, actually, no, you had one at 80,000.
Y'all actually
And there was one
graded
at
these
25.
proposals, right?
We graded
there
the
are-
proposal.
See, there's a
Yeah.
column here that they
Yeah.
show the points that were awarded
Yeah.
when the
I've
group
looked at all
graded.
those. Yeah.
And it's not just the cost itself.
No, I
So-
understand.
I guess I'd like to go ahead and walk through
Okay,
briefly
please.
take you through what the elements of the scope mean. I think Tammy can take you through that and just give you a synopsis of what each of those elements mean. I think it's important for you to understand what we were looking for and what that meant to us.
Okay.
Yes. I'll start off with the first column there is retiree insurance. And we currently offer 3 retiree insurance plans. One of those will sunset on June 30th, 2011. Another will be reviewed for possible changes effective July 1st. And the third plan will stay in place. That's the one for retirees age 62 with 20 years of service. We currently have 30 employees who are eligible to retire by June 30th. And with retiree insurance benefits. And then that number is expected to go to 60 within 3 years, 60 employees.
My comment for you on this one would be, this is sort of a smaller part, but it's part B of the work we did on pension in the last year or so. It is an obligation that is out there, and similar to pension, it's sort of been moving around in terms of what we were offering to employees at any given time. We need to kind of lock in a longer-term approach to manage the cost and manage the appropriate level of benefit for employees that are between that retirement age and age 65. So this is not nearly the scope in terms of financial impact of what you worked on pension, but it's got similar characteristics in that it's an important cost. We need to come up with a longer-term, more sustainable approach to how we provide that sort of bridge of insurance for retirees that are eligible for that.
And that is not something that everyone does. So it is something that is definitely worthy to get information about and make a decision,
And
make an informed
yes.
decision about. I'll put it that way.
Right. And then the insurance request for proposal area. Here we reviewed how well the proposer explained their process to assist us in the development of the RFP as well as the evaluation of the RFP results. With healthcare reform and legislation that's already been mentioned, we really looked at their ability to stay abreast of healthcare reform and other legislation, then how they would be able to communicate that information to us, as well as advise how it affects our plans. Long-term goals, just their ability to assist us with the development of a long-term strategy for managing healthcare costs. Communication materials, their ability to assist us in the development of various types of communication materials. And you would
And
like
this would amount to things that you're going to give to the employees for them to make the selection process.
Right, that or just any other kind of maybe communication materials related to the insurance benefits. Yes.
You know, if there are perks that they can use, like right now we have the Blue Cross Blue Shield, and there are health perks that you can use. The Blue Perks, you know, how to implement that. I know Blue Cross Blue Shield does that, but there are other things we could do in our other programs and wellness just to promote our insurance and how to communicate to the employees the changes and how to be smarter shoppers for their health care.
Is there anyone else like to just continue? Okay. Please. And then on the wellness, just the ability to assist us in the development of a long-term strategy, and as well as a communication campaign to promote wellness. And we look at that with in the form of measurable results, because we know that wellness does play a part in managing our wellness programs play a part in managing our health care cost. Public sector experience, we looked at the number of clients the consultant has or has had in the public sector and their ability to advise us of benefit trends within the Tennessee municipalities. The deficiencies, concerns, and miscellaneous column, that was just sort of for some additional things, just notable deficiencies or concerns, possibly with the RFP, or additional items that were maybe not in the scope but could be of benefit.
So I think that gives you a sense of what we asked for and looked at when we assigned those that evaluation of points within the scope. It also does have an impact on the work plan component, which I think was about 15 points. So the implementation of the scope is very closely related to the work plan, that you were able to deliver on what we asked you to deliver. So I think those two components work very much in concert, and I think help give you a sense of how we evaluated the 8 firms that we saw and how they came out, and I think it shows you that the top-rated firm really did consistently meet the different components that we asked for within the scope of service at a cost that is in line with the general proposals received, and seem to be a good value, again, driving towards that lowest and best, who best met our specifications at the best cost as well, or the most affordable cost, with coming through on those items that we ask them to perform. I would ask Shirley to comment just a little bit about whether this is really all that new. That had been a little bit of our discussion of is this different from what we have been doing in the past, and let Shirley kind of talk about our history there.
Okay, in 2005, or in January 2005, and I can speak to this from experience, we had an agent or broker, if you will, which was for our health insurance, that was located out of St. Louis, Missouri. We bid it out that year. We put out an RFP, and we did not use a local broker or any broker. We went straight with the company, with Blue Cross Blue Shield. In doing so, that first year we saved close to $3 million. Not that the broker would get that much money. We just chose to do that. However, that first year, we also put out requests for proposals for consultants, because in not having a local agent, you would still need, or a broker, you would still need someone, to give you best practices and have ideas, help you analyze. We did that. We had a contract for 3 years, and if my memory serves correctly, and I'm sure it does, it was $35,000. We had them for 3 years.
$35,000 for
each year. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a cost for a raise? You know what I mean? Commission? No, not a commission. They usually don't get
escalator or whatever, inflationary.
Cost of living kind of thing, or not cost of inflation.
Contract escalation.
No, it was a flat it was renewable it was the first-year contract, renewable for the next 2, and actually, we didn't have full-time attorneys, and at that time, it was if you wanted to get out of it, you had to pay the full contract. So we kept them for 3 years. They helped us with renewals. After that, we felt stable enough, and we had consistently, and I think Mr. Truill and Mr. Lowe can address this, we were saving money consistently enough. We felt like we could manage it throughout most of the year. And we had someone help us with the proposals and renewal time. And that was under $10,000. However, with the new health care legislation and the retiree insurance...
What was under $10,000?
The consultant.
Okay.
And it was, as I said, it was at renewal time. And when we did the RFP the last time, we had him work on that. Then this year, with all the health care reform, the retiree insurance that needs to be addressed because of the sunset clause, we felt like we really needed someone outside to give us advice and help us with the new legislation coming down, help us analyze our proposals and make sure, there are a lot of things if we stay under the line, if we can grandfather our plan in, and now that we get lots, it will be very, very advantageous to us. We need help in doing that. So we felt like we needed to put out another request for proposal for a consultant for the entire year. And we discussed whether we wanted to just get a broker or a consultant. And we felt like if we could get a consultant, which would not stand to gain from any of the commissions or by renewing with any particular insurance, we felt like it would be completely unbiased.
Well, so in this contract, will Cheryl Morgan, right? Will they be prohibited from brokering because they also are a broker?
Yes, they will not be brokering.
That's in that contract because,
They're a consultant. They are paid for the time
So
worked.
a broker and a consultant.
Yeah,
so
the analogy
they won't be able to-
of what PFM does with us on the finance side is right on target. They are independent. They're providing us with expertise to help and assist us with the expertise we have on staff to go through the RFP process, to look at the issues related to health insurance and other employee benefits, and they're paid for that service and that service only. We made very clear, I think, in the RFP process that we want that independence. We don't want you to be in a brokerage situation or a situation where you're getting a benefit from whatever decision we make, that we pay directly for the time and expertise.
And then when we went after our contract and we went to the consultant where we paid them $10,000, you said?
Under $10,000.
Yeah. Where was that consultant? Was that a local or was that in St. Louis again? Or?
No, he was from Murray County.
Okay.
And that was a much more limited scope than what we're talking about here. We intentionally wanted to broaden it to deal with these specific issues as we looked at it here. So that was really more of the some of the number crunching.
He actually helped us analyze our bids,
Yeah.
and if it was a renewal year, he helped us renew.
Well, in the light of all the things that you've said, then this particular entity would move us down the line to doing what next? I mean, I wasn't here in 2005, and this is I'm just learning about it now.
Well, they would help us with our long-range planning. We would discuss where we need to be, what we want our plan to look like, what our plan should look like, what we will need to do to meet all the health care reforms and the legislations.
What we might do in terms of when we go for RFPs for services in the various benefit categories, they would help us construct those RFPs as well as evaluate the responses and judging what's the most cost-effective approach for us in providing those benefits.
Because we still have to do that. That's
Yes.
just a step past this one.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Correct.
Okay, so we'll still be going for that kind of service.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this a 1-year contract?
This is 1 year with optional renewals. Yeah, so you're really committing to a year at this point, and give, then we decide if we wanted to continue that relationship beyond that.
And we don't have to pay the
No,
rest
we
of the
do not.
contract.
No, you do not.
If we don't do that. If we don't.
Purely at your choice to extend.
For that. First. Thought I read that in there.
About other comments at this time?
That really
What
covers.
about some other things that you want to say?
I think that just really covers it. What we put ourselves into evaluating is what's submitted at the time of bid as them putting their proposal forward, their best foot forward in terms of how they meet our needs. And I think, as you see here, we conducted a very thorough review, a very, I think, objective professional process that identified at the end of the day a vendor that met each of the components of the scope of service at a relatively good price, that has extensive experience with other local governments and public sector, which has its own unique challenges and opportunities with it. So I think it really combined all the elements we were looking for. There are a number of good proposals, but we want to get the one that best responded with what they submitted on bid day, if you will, and I think that's the evaluation we performed for you.
I do want to add, I feel like our team has done a good job managing our insurance. I'm not saying we're not capable, but with all of the new legislation and all the changes, I just think for us to be at the top and our costs to be contained and us offer the best product to our employees for the lowest cost, we're going to need some help. We also, I do want to add this, we still have one person in the benefits department. And we have
800
so just to let you know, we have Tracy now is helping her some and doing an excellent job, but I'm just saying that we have not increased the number of personnel in that department to meet the number of employees that we have added.
This is an extension of the approach we've used over the last several years. I think has paid off for the city. Shirley gave you some sense of the savings over time. It's multiple $1 million when you look at it collectively. And I will say in the 3 budgets I've been part of, our health insurance costs have been remarkably stable, in terms of we have not experienced the kind of growth that a lot of other cities and organizations have.
Even in this area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even in this geographical area.
We've really had a virtually flat number in the 3 budgets I've been involved in. It's been remarkable. So we've done things right, and the proof, I think, is in the results that we've gotten there. We know that we need to continue to work hard at that, and we want to have the assistance we need to deal with the changing environment in healthcare as well. So I'm glad to answer any other questions you have. I know you have another speaker that wants to address this. This is set on your calendar for March 22nd, because that had been what the full board had specifically addressed. Take it to this committee, but also put it on the 22nd for vote as well. So I'm not sure what action you want to take tonight out of this, but it is already put on that calendar because that was the motion of the full board at that time. So,
Will this consultant deal with anything else? Like, will this consultant be addressing anything that we can do, such as, I know some cities are doing on-site health clinics. Have we talked about that before?
We have actually talked to Williamson County and to Brentwood, partnering in an on-site pharmacy as well as an on-site nurse. Yes, these are things we're looking that we've been looking at independently. So that's part of our long-range planning. What do we want to do, and where do we want to go?
So this consultant would be consulting with you about that?
They could be, yes, ma'am, if that's what we decide.
If we need that help,
Is that something?
it's something that's open to you if you want to get that assistance. But we may be able to, evaluate that within our own homegrown talent here too. So that it's really an extension of your staff to use as you need it. That's somehow, in some ways, how the PFM arrangement has. We've got great expertise, obviously, in the finance department, but we need that additional help sometimes, as well as an outside perspective to kind of validate what we think and what we think makes sense to do, and to also maybe bring different ideas to the table that we may not have fully identified ourselves.
Well, I was going to ask, and I think you answered this, a few moments ago, but I was trying to write them down as you said them. What would be considered as the greatest strength of the proposal that you're recommending? And I met each component, and then...
Yeah, when you go down that line, they addressed, I think, strongly each of the components, from retiree insurance, from the RFP experience, from the healthcare and legislative angle, communication materials, wellness, all of those components are addressed, in addition to the fact that you got a track record working with 75 different other public sector employers, and as well as other communities in the region as well, so within Tennessee. So it's not folks that aren't dealing with a similar environment. They're folks working with the exact same kind of challenges we face now and will face in the future. So you've got a good background of experience and a vendor that responded consistently down the line on the items we asked them to.
Sorry. Questions? I've been going over this material. Can you tell me, they say, Cheryl Morgan again, they said 75 private sector clients.
Public sector.
Or public sector, I'm sorry. Private, sorry. Can't read. Do you know anything about these public sector clients? In other words, the cities that they work with now are public sector clients. Do you know what size they have? Are they dealing with smaller sizes than us, or larger sizes, or about our size?
Yes.
Or do they deal consistently with smaller clients? And also, I'm curious of the clients that I deal with. Those clients, do we know anything about them? I mean, are they like fully insured or self-insured, kind of thing like that? Because I'm just trying to get a feel for what they're normally used to dealing with.
Right.
I know Columbia is, or
Yeah,
Until
locally
this
you've
year
got
they were.
Columbia and Brentwood and Murfreesboro all in the region that are have worked with them. You've got a whole variety of cities, larger and smaller than us. I can't speak exactly to who's self-insured and fully insured. I think just from the little bit I know, there's a variety in that as well.
It's changing. From fully insured to self-insured.
they have been fully insured, yes, they are trying to go self-insured. Columbia, unless they've changed in the last year, and you may address this, they have been self-funded.
They're not self-funded.
They're not? Okay, they previously were because they had the same third-party administrator that Murray County had.
So I think it's a wide variety in terms of size and scope of what they're doing. I think
there were others listed that I didn't know. What population or how big they were.
And it's good that they do both of these, self and fully insured, because that means they can look at it and tell us if they think it would be wiser for us to go back to.
Do you know how long they've been working with clients in Tennessee?
That's a good question.
I wonder how long they've been working with clients here.
Well, they also do the survey for the Tennessee personnel. Was it personnel
TPMA,
management?
yes.
Oh, they do. They've been with them for a while. Do you think?
I would have to look at.
Well, one of the things, and I think I really want to throw this out right now too, because I noticed in there were no points given, and I don't think we have done this in the past. Maybe we have, but personally, I like to keep our business in Tennessee if we can. And I understand once in a while we have to go out. We've been in St. Louis before, and there's certain places, but especially in this economy, I really want to do business at home, and I'd prefer to do business in Middle Tennessee, but in Tennessee, and it's just good. I think it's just good business for us to do things like that. And so I just want to I want to throw this out. So when we do RFPs in the future, can we put up?
I'd suggest that's a board policy decision. I think you really need to take some time looking at that and how you do that and how important that is to you. Was not a factor identified up front, hasn't been a factor in other proposals that we do. We've just said we want the best. We want the best and lowest cost, regardless of where they're from.
Yeah, the fire department just awarded one that was not in Tennessee.
It doesn't mean that we have to award them in Tennessee, and I don't think we should be held. held to that. But I think it should be a consideration, and I think it should be, let us know if you're a Tennessee firm.
Yeah, and I've seen it done different places. Some folks do it, some folks don't.
And it's a good thing just to know and to have, because if we can, we need to work with these people, especially if they're close in bid, things of that nature.
Yeah, it's a broader policy choice. What I've kind of seen is it's maybe a few points that you can assign for that, so that if it's really close, it sways it, but it doesn't totally overwhelm someone who might be the best value from a dollar standpoint. Because that's the other component, is our taxpayers want to know that we're spending the dollars efficiently as possible as well. So that's the trade-off that you're looking at.
I will tell you that I hear from taxpayers that want us to keep our dollars at home. And that is important, very important to them. But you're right, Eric, we have to be very careful, because if we're talking $30,000 versus $80,000 or $50,000, I mean, yeah, of course.
Yeah, there's a level that you're not willing to pay for that premium.
But at some point, I'd like to bring that up as policy.
Okay, so that would be something for another.
I think that would be a different issue, and that would cut across.
And it could be for the full board to investigate.
Yeah, I think that's a wide range.
We're very happy to do whatever you ask us to do.
Okay, are we? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Ms. Shirley, you would come up now. I think down here, because we got the microphones.
Anybody else besides Shirley?
No one approached me.
Let me ask you, was there a representative from Cheryl Morgan here tonight?
No, we did not. Normally, we don't ask the
I was
people.
just wondering if anybody had come.
No, they had
Because I
called
didn't see anybody else.
We did not ask.
The other thing to know is you just passed on March 8th a vendor protest process that wasn't in place till after this, so that's always something to know that you've got that.
Okay.
Use if you want to.
Go ahead. I guess identify yourselves.
Well, my name is Ralph Drury, president. Well, I was the president and CEO of the Drury Group. Now, as of January 1st, Charles Paredes has now taken over that responsibility, and I thought I was in my twilight years, but Erickson brought that out of me. So I'm going to do the best I can tonight. I've heard Eric comment here several times on the best for the least, and I'm probably going to have to go to counseling tomorrow, because I come in here very confident that I was the best, Eric, but you've done convinced me that I'm going to have to go fire myself up someplace. Let me, first of all, the Drury Group is 8 blocks down the street on 9th Avenue. We've been in this business for a long, long time. Matter of fact, I celebrated in March 45 years of working in employer benefits. And for the past 15 years, Charles has taken over that role of being what we refer to as our health insurance guru. And he's done an excellent job and is very well recognized among the carriers in doing that. I guess the thing that I want to repeat from our last visit is the fact that we are 8 blocks down the street. And though we already understand tonight, supposedly we're not the best, but we feel we are. And we feel that we have everything to offer that I've seen in these proposals. Now, the first part of your evaluation sheet by the staff asks the question, and I don't know exactly the word if any of you have it in front of you, but it's something to the fact, are they qualified to handle the business? And yes, that's, I believe, what that says, Eric. And I gave 40 points. And the other group received 38 points for that. We received 36. So I feel pretty confident about that we do have the ability to handle the city's business, and it was even on the evaluation sheet. Now, we scored less on some of the other categories, and I'll tell you exactly why we scored less, because that proposal was very hard to follow. And that's why, Beverly, you had your range of $9,000 to $250,000. And we did the best we could do to interpret what they were really wanting out of this proposal. Was it a true consultant? Was it a broker? Or just exactly what? And what would be the process after the consultant? Would they still retain, like Columbia, the broker? And by the way, Columbia is fully insured, Murfreesboro is self-insured, so is Brentwood, Springfield is fully insured, and I can't think of the others. But if you name them, I'll be glad to tell you whether they're self-insured or fully insured. I guess I really have a problem because I use the philosophy myself of spend it at home if I can. And we do that. And I pay taxes in this city and county, and a bunch of them, as a matter of fact. And I'm just appalled, actually, at we have the ability within 2 points of someone in Covington, Kentucky to handle the city's business, but yet there's nothing considered for the fact that we're 8 blocks down the street. And you can be here in 5 minutes. And sometimes we've, I think, done that, Shirley, when you've asked us to come up here on something. Let me use the county. We don't have 75 cities or municipalities as clients. I think one that is very important, and that is Williamson County. We handle both Williamson County and the school system on all their ancillary benefits. And Charles was asked some time back to help consult them on putting together the RFP, as well as evaluating those RFPs when they came in with their benefits department. I walked into my office a couple of days ago, and the benefits manager and Charles was in the conference room, and they had been there most of the day evaluating and processing all of the RFPs that have come in. Now, I think that's impressive when we're doing that for nothing because we're getting paid on the ancillary products. And to me, that is the way we as a community should work. And they are very happy. You can call Rogers Anderson. You can call Gina Kavanaugh in the benefits department. I think you can do the same thing with the hospital. We have done the same role, played the same role at the hospital. And we're willing to do and play that same role with the city. As a matter of fact, I've even had 2 of the other employee benefit firms here say that they will come in with us and help do this for nothing. Right here's the first thing you're going to see, Shirley, when Cheryl Morgan comes in. This is ready to go to the carriers right now and evaluate, and it won't be any different much than what Cheryl Morgan was doing. And I guess after reviewing time after time here, the proposal they sent back in, it reminds me of the little lady in Chicago years ago that used to ask Burger King, where's the beef? Because I flat don't see any beef in it. It's just as your carrier for the health insurance made a comment, one of the representatives made a comment, it's just a switch and bait type of a proposal. And they're doing nothing different than what your carrier is going to do for you and any other broker is going to do for you. And that's basically, there's other things I could dispute or talk about, but a lot of it I couldn't hear down at the other end of the table. But if you have any questions or want to get anything else clarified, Charles is here and can answer those questions, so I'll turn it over to him and let the process take its route.
Again, my name is Charles Paregas, and work president of the Drew Group. The first thing I guess I should say is to the department and Eric as well. We appreciate and understand the process of the RFP that was done. We deal with them with other clients. Like Ralph said, we helped a client just recently put one together. Our issues mainly revolved around, in answering the RFP, were questions we had in more what was going to happen after. Even one of our questions that we asked because everything seemed to be so focused on the retiree benefits, and again, those are very important, and we have a lot of clients that have retiree benefits. But one of the questions we asked was this going to be about the medical insurance? Because there wasn't a whole lot in the RFP that addressed that, and maybe that was just, we were supposed to assume that that was going to be a part of it, but we couldn't do that, and that is why we asked that question. We got a positive response that it was, that went out to all the consultants. One of our other questions revolves around what the intentions were for the city in relation to commissions going forward with the products that we are associated with. And right now, and for, I can't remember whether it's 5 or 6 years, I'm not sure, but we've had the life and disability with the city. Previously, we worked on the dental 3 years ago, and during that time, we kept everything flat as we possibly could in all those in circumstances. And that was in working with the department and the city employees. And we want to continue to do that. I'm not going to question the results of this because it was an objective opinion done by this department. I guess I want to reiterate what we would like to do going forward, and I know this wasn't in our original proposal, but would be to give the city an RFP that they could use immediately at no cost. If that was such a big concern to get started, here's an RFP that just needs a little bit of tailoring to match up to what you need. And then with us and 2 other agencies here in town that currently work with the City of Franklin, form a committee with the Benefits Department to develop those long-term goals and determine what's going to happen and what's best for the employees as well as for the City of Franklin. That's being done by people who live here. That is, I guess, and again, the last part of that is everyone, as Ralph has already said, is agreed to do this as well for free. So this is different than our original proposal, but it is something that we would like to put on the table at this time.
I'd like to make a few comments if I could. And first of all, I mean, we're looking at 2 really great citizens of the community. Charles and Ralph both are people that give back. We're in a difficult situation here as Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and our staff is in a difficult situation. They have to make sure that everything they do has complete transparency and that we are as fair to everybody that brings us something so that we make as an objective decision as we can. And I think that in my mind, it's difficult to see friends and neighbors that are not happy with our results. But unfortunately, sometimes when we vote, people aren't happy either. But I think that one of the things that happens if we undermine our attempts to have an objective, transparent process where we grade as best we can, then all of a sudden, our budget and finance meetings are going to last 12 hours because we've got to consider every $10,000 award, and so it creates a lot more burden not only on staff but also on us. One of our concerns has been, are we being fair in the bidding process? And we recently did create an appeals board if people think that they have not been treated fairly in the bid process. I think that, I think we've heard some very good comments from both of you, and I think that there are lessons that we are learning still to make sure that we are fair and transparent. I think it is time to move on this. It's not really fair to the other bidders all of a sudden to say, no, we're going to take another proposal. That just starts the whole process. Now, a year from now, I think that may be different, possibly. I think it's, as best we can, we've tried to evaluate Cheryl Morgan based on the criteria that we've given them. And, I've heard varying comments about them, from very, very happy to maybe they weren't so happy, but it depends on who they're coming from. So I think it's important that we continue to maintain the integrity of our process as best we can, because it really does send the wrong message to our staff and to our community if we get away from the things that make us transparent and objective in the process.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I could leave here much happier if I felt the staff understood that they could have done a better job on this. And I understand your process, and I fully support it, because I fought very hard to get some people out of this board 4 or 5 years ago that did interfere with the staff, and it was constant chaos. So I understand that. I do at my company, or I did, run a management system by objectives. Pardon me, Mr. Skinner?
Just won't let go of it.
It's the president thing, Ralph.
Well, I forgot my thought
Well,
there. I haven't reached that age, so that's why I'm not there anymore.
Yeah, I'm reaching it too, but I think, I think all of us are eager to listen to suggestions to improve the process. And I went through the packet, and I noticed, and I'm glad Charles mentioned it, that Charles did have the opportunity to ask questions about the RFP if he didn't understand it, and there were a number of questions in there. And I would hope that staff was very responsive. It appears that they were very responsive as far as the answers. But I understand, everybody's busy. I know y'all are covered up with business, and staff I know is, they wish we'd hire some more people, but, budget times.
And I want everybody to understand here, this is not about money.
Oh, I'm not.
Obviously not, if you're offering this for no cost.
Yeah. But
it's my belief in this city, and I would, as I just said, reiterating here, I feel like the process was not intentionally flawed, but it was flawed. I don't think it was done by experienced people that should have been done.
And I would totally disagree with that. I think you have a professional purchasing manager, you have professional staff in HR who all put this out and evaluated it basically on what was turned in. I think we've tried to be very objective in evaluating it, but it's very clear where the scope of services was responded to and where it wasn't. And that's the evaluation that we tried to perform in this process. And I think you've got talented staff and you've got talented vendors who want to compete for the business. I think you got a lot of good people working through this process together.
Well, we didn't.
I was going to say, could we get more things here, and then I know there's some people who want to say some other things too.
Okay.
But what about any other?
No, we didn't expect to come here and have a reversal on this. I didn't expect that at all. And apparently I'm still not getting my point across. And I'm going to this outfit in Covington, Kentucky, and see if I can hire whoever's a snake oil salesman they got up there, because he's doing a heck of a job, or she, whichever it might be. That's it. We appreciate you giving us the time, and I know I've worried you enough, so be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming to make your points. I know that.
And Vanderbilt lost.
No. I don't want to hear that.
Okay, and then because then I know we have something else to say.
Okay.
So go ahead.
I know Margaret's got a question too. I'll make it fast. Currently, they hold
They do
the dental or something. What do they hold?
No, they do the.
Currently, they share with full service, and they do our disability and our health insurance, our life insurance, as they have since the first year I bid it out. Houston Naren has had the dental insurance since. I mean, which they're all local. They are the only people receiving a commission.
Okay. Now let me ask you a question. Sort of cobwebbed after looking through this, but I did spend some time on this RFP. But let me ask you, would these people be prohibited from rebidding contracts with the city for those specific areas like dental once we get Cheryl Morgan?
Well, no, they wouldn't at all.
Cheryl Morgan.
But if they were in this role as the consultant, I don't know how they bid for work they're helping us evaluate.
No.
So the point is to hire a consultant that is an objective advisor throughout these processes. So they're absolutely not prohibited. In fact, they would be prohibited if they were serving as our consultant.
And I want to say one thing, and I'm not throwing, and this is a little bit off of it, but it really bothers me. I'm going to take up for the group that evaluated this in my absence, and they would have been on this committee anyway. But I have a very competent staff. The city is so fortunate to have the talent we have in the HR department. And I don't think you can look at any of our numbers in insurance, health, dental, any of them, our workman's comp, and say that we are not doing a good job. So, and I'm not trying to belittle anyone else, but I do take offense when they say staff did not know what they were doing. They shared with me what they were doing. Eric was on it. Mike was. Brian is very professional. And my staff is very professional. I am very pleased with the process. They spent hours and hours and hours going over this and tried to evaluate the fairest, best way. They had criteria. They listed what they were looking for. They answered any questions that were asked. So I do want to say that I think our staff is very competent.
See. Alderman?
Bev asked the question.
You need to, I guess you need to come up.
Get a mic. I just want to reiterate that these people would not, the Drury Group would not be handling any of our insurance if they were consultants. Is that correct? I mean,
Well,
we would not.
Unless you got back into a total
I mean, where we are right now.
The way we handle things now, I don't know how you would. Because
okay.
your job is to help us evaluate the proposals that come in, and if you're one of those proposals, how can you serve both roles?
That's exactly right.
And that's what we tried to make very clear in the RFP, that we wanted that objective
And I'm not
advisor
sure-
role.
I'm not sure that they understood that tonight.
No.
I don't think they understood that we would not, if they had been chosen as the consultant, that would limit their ability to bid on insurance. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Isn't that supposed to be stipulated, though, up front?
Well,
Then why don't
No,
we
because
say
we
it
haven't.
was? Why don't we say
We
to
can't,
people
that's the part we kind of haven't been,
up front on
that's
the
different
RFP?
from what we've been talking about.
If you read the RFP, though, it clearly states an independent consultant, that you are not receiving commissions for our business.
Well, why do we accept one from them then?
we have not.
We accepted proposals from anyone that wanted to provide us with a proposal. You have an open process for that reason.
There are more that we didn't
Well,
consider because
I don't like that. Honestly, I don't like that, because the thing is, you're right, I don't think they got it. I don't think they understood that, because if I were that company and I put that in, and then I found out, that null and voids me to deal with the city.
Well, but they
Why
said...
do I want to do that?
They said that for all of these other companies, they consulted and provided the insurance. That's what they expect.
But you could, but
you're
wait
the-
a minute, Cheryl Morgan is also a broker, and we're going to prohibit them from, yes,
Exactly.
they are a broker. They are.
They're not serving as a broker.
No,
Not
but-
us.
But
They're
that
not.
company
Clearly
is-
states it.
But that company is a consultant and a broker, because I spent time researching them. And the thing is, we've prohibited them. Oh, have we not prohibited them? But you said we prohibited
It
them.
clearly
from
states it
being
in
a
the
broker.
RFP, which is part of the
Yeah.
contract. It clearly states it in the addendum. I think that question was specifically answered in the addendum. So the way the contract works is it's an overview contract. It's the respondent of the response of the selected vendor and the RFP itself. That collectively makes our contract. So what they bid on is actually, it becomes an element of their contract with us. Well, they're bidding against themselves. They're bidding on the work directly.
What I think
And
what I think they stipulated was that they would do the consulting work for free. They want to consult and sell.
The first question on the addendum is right on this issue.
And you had sent that to us.
And we sent that to you. That was sent to every vendor. That really became a part of the RFP.
Okay.
It gets folded into the RFP once those questions are asked.
So if we're looking for transparency and objectivity, it has to be this way. You can't have somebody offer the consultation and then turn around and bid on products. I think
It's
the
kind of like
taxpayer-
asking the employees to vote whether they think they deserve a raise or not.
Yes. But because this hadn't been precisely the way that we had handled it in the last year.
Our consultant that we've had for the last 3 years has not been an agent or broker for us. He has been independent. That's why we have had him.
When we go out for an RFP like this, I think we have to stay up front and say, Drury, Houston Aaron, whoever has any contract with us, if you bid on this, just know that you will not be able to also sell product.
Well, I think
Okay?
that's,
We
I
pretty
think
much
they
said that.
they said that.
It is in there.
But it is in there in black and white because to me and Margaret, where'd Margaret go? Both of us were sitting here thinking, they didn't get that, so why didn't they get that? Oh.
Well, are we ready? Are we ready to?
And also, we do have a vendor appeal process now. If any group that's
We
participated
need to
in,
make that like it.
it just started. We just voted
We just
for this,
approved it
right?
March
We
8th.
need- Yeah, let's put that in red line
So-
though. If you are a vendor, just know, I think we need to.
Well,
put that
it was clearly stated in the RFP. Whether somebody understood it or not, I
Let's
can't
put it
speak
in
to whether they
bold
did.
red.
That's why you have the question and answer process, so that you clarify any confusion about that. And I think it was pretty directly answered. You still had people who wanted to propose their approach to doing the
Right.
business.
Is the committee ready to make a recommendation
I
to?
move that we recommend the staff selection of Cheryl Morgan to the full board for their approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
You are second?
Yeah, it needs to go to the board.
Okay. Well, is there
I
further
mean, we have to
discussion
send
about
it.
this?
I just think that I understand what you're saying, Eric, and people need to be able to read the proposal, absolutely. But I would highly recommend that we do a little bit better in that by highlighting it. Because I just think, I'm not saying that it's their responsibility. I agree. And if it's in there, it's in there. But it's just like that, and also putting a thing in there. We talk about policy later about possibly letting people say that they're local, or if they're to the state of Tennessee local, or in our state. Which I like the fact that, because my constituents always tell me, try to do business with people at home in Middle Tennessee especially, and in Tennessee, the state. But I just think it'd be nice to highlight it. But
That's another policy decision that you can add to this process now.
I don't think we need to start redlining and highlighting
I know, but it's
policies, because
Because we've gone through 'em.
if somebody can't read the
Yeah, I
RFP,
know.
we don't need them to be bidding. So, we don't need to create additional work for our staff by making them go underline something. So I would disagree with you there.
Is there any other comment? Are we ready to vote?
I feel like we would have gone through
Okay,
all this.
all in favor of sending this recommendation to the board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I've got so much on this, just a minute. The next is our budget. Do we need to take a 2-minute break?
Let's take a.
No, they say not. Not.
Can I stand
No.
up?
Okay, go ahead and stand up then. Okay,
We need a.
Okay, yeah.
Minute break.
How much time have we got on this tape?
I'm just gonna sit up.
3 hours. All right.
No.
This is going to be real quick.
okay,
I just have to be satisfied with the bills.
okay. So everybody stand up. Are we ready to get back to business then?
That was a minute, man. Jeez.
You want us to stand up,
It's like a
move
teacher.
around?
Move around.
Back in your seat, students. I'm taking my shoes off.
Put your right foot in,
Yeah.
put your left foot in. Do the whole thing.
You stand up when you teach school?
Yes.
See, she stands up. She's happy to sit down.
I have to have a child down.
I'm young.
Okay, okay. Okay, let's go. Item 8 is the budget presentation from the streets, traffic, stormwater, and fleet maintenance. And we have been given
An overview.
the overview, that page that.
Of our budget, that
The overview.
some items that we think are significant that we think you need to know about. If it pleases the committee, I can go over those tonight. Get my glasses on so I can see. Maintenance division, personnel, we're asking for one new part-time person to help in landscaping. This summer we'll be taking on Columbia Avenue, so we're going to need some help there. We have reorganized some staff within our stormwater division. That, however, does not create any increase in funding. Utilities overall are down $10,800. Our projection reflects us coming in under budget this year. In construction services, expenditures are up $9,000 due to we need to paint some bollards and some decorative light poles downtown. Operating supplies, expenditures are down $27,000. There's been an additional budget line item allowed for other operating supplies, so they'll be properly dispersed, so we don't need that line item. In machinery and equipment, expenditures are down $9,400 due to fewer items requested this year. And repair and maintenance, expenditures are up $67,000. due in part to a $50,000 increase for an additional 793-ton salt facility that we're looking to place out in the McKay's Mill area on the east side of town. It takes too long to go from the east side of town back to the west side of town to get salt. So we're looking at that this year. We also have a carryover of $140,000 for our infrared truck. We were not able to secure a demo in the past few months, which would have cost less money to get a demo. So that is now being bid out.
It's out to bid now, right?
It's out to
But
bid.
We may not have it in time for this year's budget, so it may slide.
May have a carryover.
Do you think that the bid will be within that?
We hope
that
so.
price range?
We hope so. The bid opening, I think, is March 31st. So, in our traffic division, machinery and equipment expenditures are up $16,000. We are asking for a specialized conflict monitor testing piece of equipment. This tester analyzes circuits and programming, and it helps produce reports for preventive maintenance. And it will help to defend the city against tort liability lawsuits.
You may say that again?
It will help to defend the city against...
I understood that, but what did you say was going to do that?
This, it's a conflict monitor testing equipment. Repair and maintenance expenditures are down. We have a surplus of sign supplies and traffic signal parts. They're in our inventory, and this is due in part to the UPS battery backup system that works so well for us. We have to replace less parts. In total infrastructure, expenditures are down $60,000 overall. We have completed the replacement program for the mast arm installations of the internally illuminated street signs, and so we will not need that this year. In our fleet,
What about the street signs that we have to do? When are those due to be online?
You're doing them all the time, aren't you?
The
which
street
ones?
signs? Internally lit, right?
Yeah, these are the illuminated street signs that go on the mast arms.
On the mast.
We budgeted money last year, the past couple of years, to replace the ones that went bad, and we've got that done. So,
For instance, one at McHatcher and Southeast Parkway. Did y'all do
Yes.
that, or the state do that?
we did. All the signals within the city are ours. The state does not own any signals.
Good to know. Looks
In-
good.
Thank you. In our fleet maintenance division, we're requesting one new part-time administrative assistant to provide with assistance with answering the phone and general office duties due to workload demands of billing and inventory of records. and we're asking for one new senior fleet maintenance technician. This is requested to handle mechanical repairs of our city vehicles. In our operations and fleet vehicle repair and maintenance services, outsourcing expenditures may be up this year due to the increased workload and the aging fleet that may require extended service that fleet maintenance is unable to perform at this time. This increase will carry over into next year's budget, projecting an 8 to 10% increase over last year. Vehicle parts and supplies expenditures have increased 8% due to increasing repairs and parts purchases for our fleet, and some of the warranties have expired. In our capital, machinery and equipment, the projection, the possible purchase of a used alignment machine, and the addition of a heavy-duty floor lift jack for large trucks, equipment, and vehicles. Computer hardware, MIT has suggested that we will replace 4 computers and a laptop due to the age of the equipment.
It's on that new page you sent out.
Yes. That's what I passed out earlier. In our streets, stormwater, in our personnel, the reorganization of staff to transfer salaries of 4 senior equipment operator positions. These are our street sweeper operators. This equipment was placed under stormwater last year, and this year we're transferring those employees under the stormwater budget.
Okay.
Going up then.
Well, they're transferring from one to another.
Okay, and then the overtime pay, you think we could do that? 4,622? Oh, I'm just curious if you got that underneath it.
She's looking at
within the line item.
Personnel. Yeah, that's all right. You go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
We'll come back.
All right. In contractual services, expenditures are up $20,000, due in part to some USGS from the engineering department. Repair and maintenance expenditures are up $10,550, due mainly to street sweeper repairs. And in our machinery and equipment, expenditures are up $9,000 overall, $7,000 for 2 Toughbook laptops for our stormwater inspectors. In capital and machinery and equipment, $58,000 is for a stainless steel bed for our street sweeper truck, which has this sweeper has some age on it, and the existing hopper has rusted out, so we need to replace that. Under our state street aid, expenditures are up $696,040. This is consistent with our now 13 to 14-year paving cycle resurfacing program. Last year, we were only allotted $1,600,000, which is what was in the gas tax, which was $1 million short of what we projected in our 12-year paving cycle. So now we're pushing that back to a 13 to 14-year paving cycle. This $696,000 will have to come from the general fund to subsidize the gas tax and street aid.
Yeah, and that's where was our concern last year, that it turned out to be more than what the street aid was, and that is something to be looked at.
Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Didn't
yes,
produce
sir.
enough to do the
Right.
cycle that we originally identified.
And we can't just keep pushing the streets back, so...
Yeah, we've got to do.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
But actually, up until for a year or two ago, we really were not quite on a number of years maintenance. We were not.
We've got more of a systematic identification now that Joe and his staff have come up with. So.
And, of course, in the past 10 to 12 years, streets that were new back in the
that's right.
mid to late 90s are now coming due. And, as you know, we grew a lot in the past few years. So, the other thing in street aid and sidewalk repair, was transferred from the street maintenance division into the state street aid. The $100,000 represents $32,000 we would like for sidewalk connectivity along Culberson Drive. This is to connect Shawnee Petway to Jim Warren Park. As it is right now, the pedestrians are walking in the street to get from the park back and forth.
Because Culberson really was made to have a street connection, and so now you're saying we need to...
Need sidewalks for the
sidewalks
pedestrians.
with it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And also $68,000 for sidewalk maintenance repair, and that's throughout the city. We have numerous sidewalk problems that we've been addressing, but we need to start hitting them a little bit harder. Mayor Moore was telling me about one tonight in one of our newer developments. So it's an ongoing issue, and we need the money to keep that going, to try to make those repairs.
Do we still contract those sidewalk repairs?
We do, but we're starting to do some of our own in-house concrete work, and once we get the infrared truck, we're going to do more of that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Forgetting that.
We will need less people for
That frees
repair
up
work.
some staff to do
Yes.
concrete.
The salt storage out east, or I think y'all did the enclosure for the one on Southeast Parkway. Will staff be able to do the one at Liberty?
It's possible. It's possible, depending on the time frame and if we get the money and the time of year. That's my overview. If you have questions.
There are some concerns,
I
But
understand.
I appreciate this. This was a good presentation and gave us kind of the highlights. What does it say? Is there are there other specific questions about this? I'll tell you, I'm going to put little tabs on mine the way you did. I loved it because I was going through trying to do this and everything. I'd put tabs on like 2 things over here, but I like that.
I was trying to get through this one because I know there are others waiting, and
Yes.
time is of
As
the
I
essence.
say, I
so
appreciate
You're more than welcome.
your organization on putting it together. Thank you.
Right.
Any others? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Who was that guy?
Who's that flash?
Okay, item number 9 is the budget presentation from engineering and stormwater and TAC.
But you could do that in your sleep, Joe.
We'll try to go a little quicker than Joe.
See, we're starting a little competition among the staff.
I think ours is pretty easy. There's not a whole lot of change in engineering. The engineering portion of the budget, it does go up some, but the main difference in that is in this current budget year, we've got a quarter position budgeted. We budgeted just for a quarter of the year, and so next year we'll have the full year for that position. So that, we held off this year and waited until the last quarter to begin the hiring process. Next year we'll have a full year on that. The other, and that's about 75% of where we're increasing. The other 25% is due to some things like, you may remember last year we talked about, we dropped our CAD software. We no longer had CAD this year. As Paul can probably attest, we've had to kind of scrape by with free versions to try to do things in-house. It's probably cost us a lot more staff time doing it that way, and so we're looking at adding CAD back this year, and that's really the 2 big differences with the engineering budget.
How much will that CAD program be?
Well, we haven't gotten a firm estimate yet, but we've entered in $10,000 for software. We're thinking it's probably going to be a little bit less than that. But just for budgeting purposes, what we've put in right now is $10,000.
And the need for the 1 extra person.
Well, really, it's not an additional person.
No, but I mean.
Oh, it's just workloads, continued. I'll tell you where we've really shown where we need some additional help is right-of-way acquisition. We talked about this last year. Mac Hatcher, we had 45 properties that we've had to acquire. Hillsborough, we've got about 70. And then with the off-site overhead lines as part of Hillsborough, you remember what there's like another 70 or 80? So we've got one person really working for that. And we had a part-time intern helping with a lot of that. And that's what we really did this year. We transferred that part-time position to a full-time position. And that full-time position next year will continue to help in areas like that. TOC, we are asking for an additional position there. That would, we talked about this last year in our presentation, that with the TOC projects that we've done over the past couple of years, we've increased our infrastructure by 5-fold. And with that comes maintenance. Joe's guys do the maintenance on the traffic signals, but our guys do the ITS maintenance. And so because we've got an additional task of maintenance to do, we feel like having somebody that can cover the TOC while our guys are either out maintaining or they also do some project management. So that's where that need came up. Big difference this year. Capital, we're asking for about $1.9 million more than we were last year. $800,000 of that is carryover from this year, so it's not a full $2 million that we're asking more. It's really about little over $1 million that we're asking for. And the big project that we're looking at, you may remember that we got ARA funding this year for an ITS project, which installed probably about 40 to 50% of our ITS infrastructure. We're looking at trying to round out the rest of our infrastructure over the next year and a half or so. And so $1.5 million for that project is in this capital. And that also ties in with the the IT department's fiber project. So it's kind of a combination of things there.
So we would be using the same, trenches, or are we using the same fiber?
A little bit of both. Mm-hmm. Yes, where we can use the same actual fiber, we will. Where we have to have separate, if we can if we can put two conduits in the same trench, that saves on IT having to come back and install somewhere else.
Going down the road again, or no?
No. It will go down the road.
Wait,
but it will not go down the middle of the road. No.
Okay, that's what I meant.
Right.
Oh, and before, whenever we were doing things like this, didn't we have like federal grants or things like that?
Sorry, I haven't got.
Okay, you're good. I've gotten ahead of you. Go ahead.
Of the $2.6 million that we're asking for in capital, 70% of that is match. Comes out to $1.88 million.
Is grant money?
Yes. Yes. That includes. We do have a little bit of that's carryover. I think all of the carryover is actually grant funded in some way. But yes, 70% of what we're asking for is grant funded.
Wow. So you would see that on the revenue.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. You'll see an increase on our capital, but you'll also see an increase in revenue from us.
I didn't mean to jump ahead of
That's
you.
okay.
Well, something else.
I almost forgot, so thank you. TDOT, and a lot of it comes from TDOT. We still have, I think we're estimating carrying over about $200,000 from the ARA funded project. So that comes from either TDOT, Federal Highways, usually. Stormwater, really pretty similar to what we had last year. The one change in that, we're looking at converting our intern position to a full-time position. A lot of that has to do with, we talked about last year. We had just, I think, news was just out that we were going to have the new permit that was approved this past year from the state, which requires us to do monitoring for stormwater and different things like that. And so the reason why we need this additional person, they're going to be doing a lot of the same tasks that our intern was doing. It's just we need them more than just for part of the year. We need this for the full year. So that's why we're looking at converting from part-time to full-time. And then what's different this year with stormwater, we did include all the CIP capital projects. So what was in the CIP from last year, Eric had asked us to go ahead and move those projects into the capital. So you will see a big difference because it was in a different location last year. So that's a summary of what we've got. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any comments, questions? Okay, thank you, and thank you for being very, very organized and precise about.
Thank you.
What we're looking at.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Somebody's got a timer.
Okay.
There's a
Item
pile.
number
Yep.
10 is the budget presentation for planning. Planning and sustainability, I guess we should say.
And I can be even briefer than Eric. I know I can. What we are basically looking at is a continuation budget. We are asking for a half-a-year engineer position, and that would only be filled if we should need it as we move into some of the developments that we anticipate may be coming. So, only at that point in time would we be asking for that position to be filled. We're also asking for an intern position to help us with some of the landscape issues that we have as projects are completing from 2006, 2005, and we have to do both landscape inspections and also the paperwork involved in that. So we need a little assistance in that area. Primarily, the only thing going up in operations is about $4,000 in computer and file cabinets under furniture and software. And then we are reducing public relations and education, promotions and special events, and consultant services to the amount of about $14,600. Now, some of that reduction will be a transfer of the illumination event from the planning budget to the special events budget. And that will probably be in the area of about $5,000 in real money and some additional funds for staff time. That is really the budget. Does anybody have any questions?
And you're seeing things, talking about.
Oh, yes, and yes, I did a PowerPoint. There it is.
I was looking at this. Back it up.
Yeah, I was going to say, we could have looked at those. They were pretty impressive. Yeah, and the one before that, too.
Very pretty.
Kelly does a wonderful job with these things. There really isn't anything. We'll look at having consultant services of $7,500 for engineering and planning reviews should we need them. A lot of times we don't, but if we have an emergency situation come up, we like to know that we have some funds available to us. And then those are our sustainability accomplishments because we're planning in sustainability. And, we've worked on a lot of things and we have a lot of goals coming up in the next several years.
That's a big difference in the consultant fees. What do you attribute that to?
Well, we've been doing most of our studies and that type of thing in-house for the last 2 years at least. And so last year we did a character update in-house, and we will be doing the same this year.
Okay.
And any other study that we have primarily have been done in-house.
Good.
Which has been a good thing for us to do, and it's worked very well in my opinion. Thank you very much. And number 11 is the budget presentation for building and neighborhood services. And no problem on the schedule.
Good evening.
Yeah, I think Catherine got the awards so far. You were best.
Well, the Building and Neighborhood Services Department proposes no changes in positions. We have 28 positions, and we propose to leave those positions. 2 of them will remain open.
Of the 28?
Of the 28. They'll be vacant. We never filled 2 positions in this present year's budget. We're just going to roll them